So we've talked about children and young people today, but our next speaker is going to be talking about a uniquely Australian approach to future generations. So I'd like to welcome Taylor Dee Hawkins. Taylor is the Managing Director of the Foundations for Tomorrow, a non-for-profit with the mission of advancing the protection of future generations' interests in Australia, which has also recently launched the Australian Parliamentary Group for Future Generations. Taylor is also an advisor to the Our Future Agenda initiative to the United Nations. She has a professional background rooted in a leadership and development specialist working in organisations such as Google and Salesforce to foster leadership fit for the future. She has many accolades. I don't think I'll read them all out. Very, very impressive. And I recently had a Zoom call with Taylor, and there's not many people I don't think I could keep up with, but I couldn't keep up. Yeah, please welcome Taylor. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I have to say, I feel really grateful to be in such a friendly room. I'm used to speaking to private sector leaders, to MPs and whatnot, and I feel like I'm among friends here, so thank you. And I have a far easier job than my colleague, our head of research, who's currently, actually right now, on stage at State of the Nation in Parliament House. So I am slightly nervous on her behalf, but she's going to kill it, so it's fine, just giving myself that sense of zen. So yeah, feel like I'm playing a bit of a home game here, which is wonderful. And I wish that I could tell you that I'm going to give you a break from some of the linguistic diversity that you're seeing in your presentations. It's not the case. You might hear me oscillate between a few different terms, and that is because we are in the throes, wonderfully supported by some of the team at Eracy, of trying to clarify the language in this space. So I hope you will bear with me. But I would also like to echo the acknowledgement that I've heard a few times already today, but specifically in our area of work, which is acknowledging the First Nations leadership that our work builds on. The kinship principle, stewardship, seventh generation thinking, future generations policy is hugely built on the leadership that we have seen in this country with the longest living culture on our planet. So incredibly grateful for the wisdom, leadership and insight that we have built on and continue to learn from in that work. But with that, I will give you a bit more context on us. I'm wondering if we can put the slides into sort of full presentation mode. If not, happy to scroll. So I'm Taylor. As you know, we started Foundations for Tomorrow, and we'll see, oh, it does flick it through. Great. We started Foundations for Tomorrow in 2020. I would like to say it was well thought enough through to be purely in response to the pandemic. We had a project already underway that then the pandemic intruded on a little bit. So we pivoted and we went out and asked 10,000 young people what a more just, equitable and sustainable future looked like to them. At the time, we were intended to be a purely climate-focused organization. So our questions were very much focused on that, but thank goodness we had a long-form qualitative question at the end of our survey. And my co-founder, who is far more technically skilled than I am in this area, completed sentiment analysis on the 10,000 responses that we received. And it resulted in a full pivot of our organization. What we found was that the most consistent theme that we saw with young people is that they did not believe or did not see how their government and how their leaders were thinking about their future, the long-term future that their lifespan would see, that maybe the leaders of today wouldn't see during the tenure of their leadership. And that's a really important delineation that I want to make. It's not that they won't see it in their lifetime, which is the thing that truly boggles my mind. It's that they won't see it in their election cycle. They won't see it in maybe their tenure as CEO. And that's what we really chose to focus in on. And that survey launched a year of pestering people via email and emailing the Singapore Centre for Strategic Futures and the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group and Future Barbados and the Finnish Committee for the Future. I have harangued pretty much everyone at any of those offices that you can think of. And it is indicative that if you ask nicely enough, most people will say yes. So we completed consultations with pretty much all of those offices and asked, we're a group of young people, we are tenacious, we have no money but a fair bit of time, what do you suggest that we do? And the consensus that came back from that was to start the parliamentary group as a starting point to foster dialogue on what future generations policy could look like in Australia, and to just start to fortify what this conversation looks like here, because as I will keep coming back to, it's about a uniquely Australian approach because, and I am a huge fan both of the Welsh approach and of Sophie Howe, we need a localized approach. We need it to sing from our cultural history, from the potential of our future, and from a shared vision and identity, which, as I'll cover a bit later, we're lacking, in my personal opinion, at the moment. But that brings me to what our mission is at this point, which is to empower Australian leaders to transcend the electoral cycle and financial quarters that are trapping us into short-termism, that are really undercutting, and I say this maybe with optimism, but the true passion of our leaders. And we are very lucky in Australia that we have leaders who want to do better. And at the moment, our systems and our infrastructure just isn't quite servicing them in meeting their own ambitions for their leadership. I can count on one hand the leaders that I've left a meeting with over the last few years, and I've gone, I don't think you got into that for the right reasons. Most of them, even if they got lost along the way, want this. They want this in one way or another, depending on the language that you use. We've done some interesting A/B testing along the way, and I can tell you justice lands well with some groups and not with others, but that will surprise no one. So with that, a bit more context on where we focus our work. So we focus on what we call generational challenges. So those are challenges that will disproportionately impact some generations more than others. I'm specifically being vague there because it's not just about young people. This is a conversation that we want to include our aging generations in. We want a well and prosperous society for everyone, and that requires us to look beyond ourselves. So we want to walk the walk with, it's not now just about young people, it's about all of us coming together and having safe spaces for dialogue and progress. These generational challenges require that intergenerational collaboration to solve them. Exactly to the point of some conversations I was having just before I got up here, is it's about the nuance and finding the co-benefit, and how can we work together to design health and education and housing policy that creates well-being that looks across all factors and not just one. Because if we keep this narrow focus, we will continue to make the same mistakes over and over again, as we have seen. And unfortunately, these generational challenges will take a generation to solve, if not more. And so it's coming at this with, yes, the youthful exuberance that I will hold on to as I am 29. I have one more year to, by some global standards, claim that I am a young person. I will soon have to bow out. It's very sad. But we need to come at this with the patience and sustainability in our leadership that and I'm a big fan of many people in this room, by the way, that so many of you have demonstrated, which is staying at the work and making sure that this is a conversation that feels like it's not a flash in the pan, that it's not going anywhere. I spoke with Anne Sharma yesterday. Obviously, the duty of care team had a bit of a blow with those results, but it's about looking at what progress have we seen just with entering these conversations into public consciousness, with making it so people feel more familiar and more resonant with the words that we're using, even if they are shifting around a little bit. I speak for myself on that. So as someone who does do a bit of work with the UN, I heard the Summit of the Future mentioned a bit earlier, there's a bit of a nuance in our work that's a bit sticky. We focus on young people and the generations to come. A strict UN purist would say young people are not future generations, which I totally understand. In the Australian landscape, we definitely find this is working better, as well as the fact that young people have so many overlapping insights with interests with future generations that it feels like a powerful combination. Many people ask me, how many generations are you looking into the future? Look, if I had my way, and in some of my other work, we talk about the year 2100, most people aren't that keen on that or ready for it. So we focus once again on that generational frame. So looking 20 to 30 years into the future. But I hope that with time and as our leadership capabilities build, that we can look beyond that. So how did we get here and what are we doing now? Having started in 2020, we did our landscaping, looking at what other countries were doing, trying not to make some of the same mistakes that we've seen other countries make. Don't worry, we've made plenty of our own, but that is fine. And then we established the parliamentary group. And as a result of the work that we did last year, bringing together many stakeholders who are in this room, who have now turned into sort of mentors and colleagues in this work, we then launched the Intergenerational Fairness Coalition. And sorry, it's confusing me that I can see two of my slides at the same time. But so having launched the parliamentary group in February last year, we brought together 24 federal members of parliament. And out of those 24, I would say about 8 became quite active champions and allies of this conversation. We met with them several times throughout last year and tried to walk them through this experience, not bombard them all at once, but start with, what is future generations policy? Because as we all know, whether you're talking about well-being, resilience, sustainable development, future generations, we're all trying to hit on this similar value system, but it's how do you draw out how they can see themselves in that work? And so I can tell you our comms is a complex bowl of spaghetti of what is this person's policy platform and how can we link their work to this agenda? And out of that 24, and then out of that 8, we now have 2 really powerful champions who are looking forward to working with later this year. That is Sophie Scomps and Bridget Archer, and we'll be working on a private members bill, which anyone who's interested to talk about that further. It is a whole load of work that's standing in between me and November, so very keen for any input or help or guidance, because our team has much tenacity and much expertise, absolutely, but the wisdom of experience that's held in this room is something that we certainly don't underestimate. But we will be working on that alongside many of the partners of the Intergenerational Fairness Coalition that launched at the end of last year as a result of the tenacity that we share with many other organizations. We now have 20 that we work alongside who have committed to some of the mission that we have already articulated, which is having a Future Generations Commissioner, or, and this is the comma and slightly italicized piece, finding what is the best next step. We want to be practical. We want to be hearing from everyone else. And as I've already had conversations in the last few days, we want to push for that boldly, but if we're hearing that there's another sequencing that works better, we're also big advocates for the idea of a national conversation, because as I get to the end of my slide deck, you'll see there's a few pieces in the roadmap that, I'll be candid, I'm not even sure what order they need to go in to be most effective, and that's the task that we face now, is from a place of pragmatism, what can we get through most quickly? And I think to what was said just before, I actually wrote it down, perfection can kill you, just try and get as close as you can. And that, I'm going to use that as a sense of calm over the coming months, because I think perfection is far out of my grasp, but I will get as close as I can in how we navigate this. And so just to give a bit more context on why we're so excited and what the Australian opportunity in this space is number one, there's clear demand. I think we did a 1,000 person sample size survey recently in partnership with ANU and Griffith University and found that 78% of respondents were in favour of establishing a commissioner for future generations, which is a wildly positive result in the context of that sort of survey. We're also seeing increasing political traction and attention. It's a very anecdotal example, but we, in our 6th parliamentary group meeting, which happened Tuesday this week, every meeting prior, I have called every member of the group maybe 3 times in the weeks leading up to that meeting, and I've struggled to get 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 MPs there. We had 8 there, and I made no phone calls because I had no time, because I was getting phone calls from many of their offices. So there's nothing to do with us necessarily, but this conversation is working. People are interested, there is traction, and if we can wrangle the chaos effectively enough, we can really capitalize on this window. The civil society momentum, as I have mentioned, with the parliamentary group, Intergenerational Fairness Coalition, and so many of the other initiatives mentioned and represented today, mean that we have this building body of work. And as I was saying to Paul just before, anything we have, please take it, use it, repurpose it. I hope that we can all come with this attitude of sharing insights to get further. With the federal election coming up, certainly that opens up huge opportunities. And as our wonderful head of research, who's on stage at CEDA right now, has written in great detail, we're innovation ready. If you compare us to other countries with many of the metrics that set countries up for success for this sort of policy innovation, we are leading the charge between our social cohesion, our public institutions, our research sector. We have everything that we need if we're just willing to get in amongst it. And to the point of the global movement, we have the UN Summit of the Future in September. So that will deliver a pact for the future, chapter 4 of which is entirely focused on young people and future generations. And an annex to that will be the Declaration on Future Generations, which will include in it some powerful definitions, some guidelines that we can then use on a national level to further propel this conversation. So global standards have already shifted, but will be codified in September this year. And that's a really powerful shift that we are certainly looking forward to. I'm also looking forward to after that when I get to sleep more, because global progress and national progress at the same time means not much sleep, I can tell you. But so that means that we're looking at the benefits, once again, in a room full of friends. I don't think I need to spend too long on this slide, but if we embrace future generations policy, if we embrace well-being government, if we embrace so many of these ideas that we're talking about today, it has far-reaching consequences, even beyond the metrics that we measure in that work. It will strengthen our democracy. It will foster trust that I can see is so broken across generations. And that's not just with young people. I was speaking at we hosted an intergenerational town hall, the oldest attendee of which was 87, and he was telling me, he previously worked for government, and he was telling me his trust was fractured. And so this is a shared experience that we can then unite together to combat, rather than falling into the trap of the intergenerational warfare that we're seeing plaguing these spaces. So it allows for intergenerational solidarity, risk mitigation, and economic dividends. The research in this space is incredibly compelling that the benefits of taking a preventative approach are absolutely fantastic. And we have the opportunity to be a world leader. As I mentioned at the beginning, and I hope to continue mentioning it every time I talk anywhere about this, First Nations leadership is at the heart of future generations policy. This country has in its soul had this notion of stewardship and intergenerational thinking for 65,000 years. And so it's a gift that we are able to tap into the wisdom and the leadership that is embedded in communities of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So, and forgive me once again, the anecdotal tangent, like when I was at the SDG Summit last year and talking about this stuff as I do, rambling on about future generations policy, and I had several people say to me, well, with the First Nations culture that you have in Australia, you must be so well positioned, or you must be embracing that leadership so well. And I have to say, I felt a great deal of shame to say, yes, we have a huge opportunity that we're currently failing to capitalize on. And I really look forward to anyone who's interested in finding ways to do that more effectively, hit me up. I'm very keen. But I think that will be a key benefit because we can really take a leadership stage in the same way that we did when we introduced the e-safety commissioner. First country in the world to do that. And I hope to drive this point home with any MP that will listen to me, the amount of benefit that Australia gained from being able to demonstrate that level of leadership went beyond the warm fuzzies. It was very good for us on a huge number of levels, economically, politically, etc. And so there's huge benefit here as well. This is a bit of a deeper dive, and similarly to my colleagues, I've lost track of how much time I have left. Oh, 5 minutes. Oh, I can slow down. Great. I was getting panicked, just starting to sweat. Fab. So back to the research. There's a few other insights that came from this that I think are really great for us to take away and that have been super powerful in the recent meetings that we've had. So number one, that 97% of respondents believe that policies in present day should take into account future generations' interests. Now, I'm obsessed with this stuff and I didn't expect that number to be this high. And so that's really fantastic. And this research is a powerful tool I encourage anyone in this space to start using. You can also see that there's strong support for seeing politicians referencing that longer term view in their decisions and saying that they are being too short term in their decisions too often. Apologies, I made my text size far too small and didn't wear my glasses, which is clearly a bad combination. And 82% saying that it would positively affect their voting if they did see that longer term vision in our political leadership. But to dig into a bit more of what this can look like in practice, as I said, I have harangued too many of these officers. This is not a perfect sort of 5-set framework, but it does encapsulate quite a few of the ways that we're seeing different countries approach future generations policy. So number one being adjustments to norms and processes. So this is and I say this, I love the unexciting stuff, but this is the unexciting pieces. This is, the impact assessments and the frameworks that you have to check against as you develop policy. We're seeing it in a lot of different countries, Canada, New Zealand, etc. You then have your institutional measures. So this might be an institution with a direct or indirect mandate. So we can even see that in the ACT with our Environment and Sustainability Commissioner. You can see it in Singapore with the Centre of Strategic Futures, that within the remit, there is a mandate to consider the long-term impacts of decision-making, even if, once again, it's not using exactly the same language. So whether you're talking about strategic futures or I was at the World Economic Forum last week and I was talking all about foresight, but all of the same concepts, which is how can we embrace foresight enough that we are leaving a better world for our children and our grandchildren. We also have parliamentary representation. Now, this is a sneaky one because you can have anything from humble parliamentary groups, which it has been very impactful for us, but on base is not necessarily the most inherently impactful tool in the world, all the way through to those more formal and long-standing groups, such as the Finnish Committee for the Future. You can also have legislative initiatives. Some of these overlap with one another. So the Welsh Wellbeing for Future Generations Act is a great example of that, which we are definitely modelling off significantly here. But there are quite a few other examples in the works in different countries around the world. And then constitutional measures. I have mixed feelings about this one. So 41% of constitutions in the world reference a need to safeguard the interests of future generations. Yeah, your face is right. It's not, sorry, someone just did this. It's not working terribly well, but it's good that it's there. And if you then dig into the detail of those countries that have that reference, people have effectively used that to leverage other change. So this isn't a question of which one of the 5 is the best approach. It's how can we use this suite of options? There's others that aren't included on here, like strategic litigation, elements like that we can use together to corral progress. So no silver bullet, unfortunately, but a very nice buffet of options that we can be looking at. So for a roadmap for the future, as far as we understand it, number one, crafting a uniquely Australian approach. This will be a huge amount of what our team and our colleagues in the coalition will be working on over the coming months as we try and deliver insights to the MPs in the parliamentary group to guide their advocacy on this platform. Is what does a uniquely Australian approach look like? Australian policy landscape is not inherently entirely broken. There are a lot of fantastic things that have already been done. There's a lot of great work in this room already been done, other meetings that we know happening in tandem that we're not seeking to counteract. We're saying, look how much knowledge there is available to you. How can we piece this all together to create something that really sings to the heart of that second point, a shared identity and vision of what it could mean to be Australian? Because I have to say, after the results of the referendum last year, I'm not super sure what it does mean at the moment, and I'm really excited to be part of helping to define a shared vision, be it through a national conversation, be it through whatever means we approach it, but really identifying a mission and a vision that when I travel overseas, I can be really proud again to say, I'm Australian, we stand for this, and we're demonstrating that in our actions in this, and this way. We need an independent, well-resourced and protected mechanism. I am very much advocating for a Future Generations Commissioner, but it is a question of how can we find how that is best placed? Is it embedded in an existing commission? Is it a wholly freestanding one? That is something that we hope to answer in the next few months and looking at the pros and cons. But we can set up a commission, we could do all the fancy, shiny innovations in the world, but if we don't create the culture and the capabilities that follows that through, we will fall flat. And we've seen that in other countries. That was one of the biggest learnings that we had speaking to those other officers, is that you can have even the legislation, but if you don't support your leaders in making that skill set and mindset transition, you will be fighting an uphill battle. So those would be the 4 key things that I definitely hope that we can embed into a shared roadmap as we all continue to work together. But for us, from here, we will continue working with the parliamentary group. You can see us digging into the detail between our last meeting, which was 2 days ago, through to the Summit of the Future. And when we hope to start initiating public action in November, we will have the Intergenerational Fairness Summit in November, but also with that private members bill surfacing around that time as well. And anyone who is interested in anything I've said, we welcome your input. We're very collaborative, and also know that what we maybe have in spades in youthful exuberance, we don't have so much as time around the block. So if you have insights or wisdom you would like to share, very interested. But a huge thank you to the organisers for having me here today, and I really look forward to the conversation. Thank you.